Good evening, everyone. I'm Blaine Brownell, president of Ball State and University, and it is my great personal pleasure to welcome all of you here to this keynote event of UniverCity 2000. As many of you know, the theme for this week-long academic festival is Time to Time. So for the past 6 days, a number of scholars, artists, and commentators have helped us examine the past, but also challenge us to move forward, exploring constructive and creative ways of living in this new 21st century. And although tomorrow is the last day, there is still the opportunity to participate in over 25 more events, including readings, book signings, game shows, displays, demonstrations, and workshops. In addition, on Friday, Ball State alumnus Wayne Leonard, who is the CEO of Entergy Power Company in New Orleans, will speak at 10 a.m. Ruth Dudley Edwards, historian and journalist, will keynote at 6:30 p.m., and Dr. Brian Greene, physicist and string theorist, will follow at 8 to speak on the elegant universe. All of these events, as all other events in UniverCity 2000, are free and open to the public, and I hope you'll make every effort to attend. UniverCity has been an enormous success thus far. Clearly one of the most ambitious intellectual and cultural festivals held on any university campus. It exemplifies and expands the essential qualities of the university, and it constitutes a major resource for this community. As we eagerly await this keynote address for UniverCity 2000, I want to again thank the coordinators, the members of the steering committee, and all the others who have made this possible. And I want you to know that I believe we should definitely do this again, and that UniverCity should become a regular part So prepare to get ready in another 2 years or so, and we'll do this again. This evening you have come to hear Elie Wiesel, and I join you in eagerly anticipating his keynote address. But first I wish to thank the Northern Kentucky Brotherhood, the fine a cappella vocal group that you heard just prior to coming in. And I also want to thank in advance Mr. Robert Stewart, who is interpreting tonight's program for you. I also wish to recognize the support of the Benjamin and Bessie Ziegler Fund in bringing Mr. Wiesel to our campus. We very much appreciate the generosity of the Ziegler family and its interest in this university. I want to note one program note that the meeting mentioned in your program of Mr. Wiesel and honors students following his presentation to be held this evening in Williams Lounge is not open to the general public, unfortunately, but is restricted to only 20 selected honors students, very lucky honors students, I might add, and they know who they are. Now, I am certain that many in this audience already know a great deal about Elie Wiesel and his work on behalf of oppressed people throughout the world. As author, teacher, and storyteller, he has used his personal experience of the Holocaust and his talents to defend human rights and promote peace. These efforts have earned him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the United States Congressional Gold Medal, the rank of Grand Officer in the French Legion of Honor, and in 1986, of course, the Nobel Peace Prize. His more than 40 books, which include Dawn, The Accident, The Testament, A Beggar in Jerusalem, The Fifth Son, and his memoir, All Rivers Run to the Sea, have also won numerous awards. In 1944, Elie Wiesel, age 15, and his family were deported from their home in Transylvania, now in present-day Romania, to Auschwitz, where his mother and younger sister perished. Later, he and his father were transported to Buchenwald, where his father also died. Of the family, only Elie and his 2 older sisters survived. After the war, Mr. Wiesel studied in Paris and became a journalist, yet he remained silent about what he had endured as an inmate in the death camps. But later, during an interview with French writer François Mauriac, he was persuaded to tell of his experience, and subsequently he wrote the book Night. Since its publication in 1958, Night has been translated into 25 languages, and millions of copies have been sold. This summer, every incoming Ball State first-year student was given the book to read. Discussion groups were held during Welcome Week, and many classes are now using this book for class projects, papers, and further discussion. Since 1976, Mr. Wiesel has been the Andrew W. Mellon Professor in the Humanities at Boston University, and in 1980 he became the founding chairman of the United States Holocaust Memorial Council. A devoted supporter of Israel, he has defended also the cause of Soviet Jews, Cambodian refugees, the Kurds, South African apartheid victims, famine victims in Africa, and more recently, the victims and prisoners in former Yugoslavia. 3 months after receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, Marion and Elie Wiesel established the Elie Wiesel Foundation for Humanity, which has created a forum for the discussion of urgent ethical issues confronting humanity. Last night, on this same stage, Scott Simon of National Public Radio reflected about how his Quaker pacifism was sorely tested by his experience as a correspondent in Sarajevo during the gruesome siege in which ethnic and religious hatred decimated a once proudly diverse urban community. And as you may recall, Mr. Wiesel was also present as a direct witness of that disaster in Sarajevo. Scott Simon's conclusion was that true peace cannot exist without justice, or at least the perception of it, and that even our own society may harbor the capacity for such disaster given the right circumstances. Tonight, Mr. Elie Wiesel will approach these urgent issues from his own perspective in an address entitled Confronting Fanaticism, Building Moral Unity in a Diverse Society. Please help me in welcoming to Ball State University and to Muncie, Indiana, Nobel laureate, Mr. Elie Wiesel.
President Brownell, members of the faculty, students, friends, a few preliminary remarks. One, I like to teach small classes. Two, when I see so many of you, I remember what I felt when I was invited once, for reasons that are totally strange and incomprehensible to me, to throw out the first ball or the first game of the World Series. I, who had never seen a baseball game, I have no idea what they wanted. I hope today you know, you have an idea what I want. Three, I know that according to the rules here, after I will give you my meditations, my comments on situations that have to do with morality, there will be questions. I want to warn you, I believe in questions more than in answers. However, if you will ask a question and I will not be able to answer, I will tell you a story. And now, a story. One of my favorite ones. It's about one of the great writers of the 20th century, the one who influenced my own writing and my own concept of life and society and humanity, Franz Kafka, whose work I'm sure you have studied in this prestigious university. The story is that Franz Kafka, who was sick, used to spend his summer vacation in a spa. It was either Marienbad or Karlsbad, which was in Czechoslovakia. And one day he came to an inn, he registered Franz Kafka. The innkeeper said, the name sounds familiar. Kafka, being modest, said, it's impossible. Okay, said the innkeeper. A few minutes later, a knock on the door. Mr. Kafka, do you happen to be a writer? Kafka said, why do you ask? Because my son, said the innkeeper, heard you were here, and he is so excited. He thinks that you are a very great writer. Kafka says, tell him it's a case of mistaken identity. Innkeeper left, came back. He said, Mr. Kafka, my son is a nooch. He wants to meet you. And you know what? You want to rest. I want to rest. See him for a few minutes and he will go. In came a student, blushing. Mr. Kafka, this is the greatest day in my life. Why? Because you are Kafka. So what? Said Kafka. Mr. Kafka, don't you know you are a very great writer? Kafka says, how do you know? He said, because I read your book. You read my book? Which one? He said, I think The Castle. You read The Castle? Where did you get it? He said, I bought it. And Kafka said, no, it was you? I'm telling this story for many reasons. Number one, because I heard that the freshman class, poor class, had to read my book. So it was you. But then also Kafka really speaks about the subject that we are trying to deal with tonight, about a moral society. The society described in all of Kafka's novels was anything but moral. Why? Because everything was wrong. Justice didn't even have the appearance of justice. Friends were no friends. The solitude of the victim was total. And the worse, there was absolutely no communication between person and person. Joseph K. in the trial, for instance, whenever he said anything to anyone, somehow the words, the moment that the words left his lips, changed because the other one didn't understand them. So they spoke as if on different planes about different things, and there was absolutely no way of understanding between Joseph K. and his surroundings. It began with a good morning, and it ended with an execution. He wasn't guilty, but he was accused, and because he was accused, he felt guilty. Now, this is therefore one of the aspects of an immoral society. Why should one build a moral society? Why isn't society, by definition, as if a present, an offering that came from heaven down to earth? Look, this is the moral society, for better or for worse, that's it. Why do we have to build it? And of course the reason is because this is not God's doing, it's our doing. God created the world. It's our duty to perfect it, to improve it. Yes, to improve upon God's work and do something good with things that were there for us, given by God. Now, remember one thing, that when God created the world, as we read in the Bible, he didn't do so well either. Look, he changed his mind. In the beginning, he created Adam and Eve, and they were alone, maybe happy. The only problem, I always envy, or don't, Adam, because he's the only person in the world, only man in the world who never suffered from a Oedipus complex. But he had so many other complexes, And so we read in the Bible Adam and Eve, and the serpent came. And then the serpent, at that time we are told by the commentaries, was actually a human being. He walked. And because he seduced Adam and Eve to eat the forbidden fruit, he was punished. They were punished to be exiled, and he was punished. What was his punishment? To crawl in dust. and to eat dust. The serpent eats dust. So there was a very great Hasidic master called Rabbi Mendel of Kotsk. And he said, I don't understand. What kind of punishment is it? The serpent is never hungry, since there's always dust. What kind of punishment? And he said, that's the punishment. Never to be hungry. Now, we live in a society here in America, for instance, our society, where, let us say technically, we should say that nobody is really hungry, although we know there are hungry people. But the majority of our people is not hungry. I would even say overfed. Now, our punishment is that we don't know what hunger is. We don't know what it means to be hungry. That in Africa and in Asia, and when you go to certain refugee camps or to certain villages in Africa, and you see the hunger, the starvation, that is our punishment, that we don't know what they feel. There is something which haunts me, has been haunting me for years, and it's a kind of vow that whenever I speak in public, I remind myself and those who are gracious enough to be with me. The worst victims are the children. When children are hungry, not for love, that is normal. For joy, it's normal. For games, it's also normal. But when children are really hungry, physically, materially hungry, that is terrible. Now, do you know, statistically, that every minute, literally every minute, when you look at your watch now, you will see, while you look at your watch, every minute a child dies somewhere on this planet. Starvation, disease, or violence. And that is our sin. For that we could prevent. There's absolutely no reason in the world why we, who live in a democratic society and with a good economy, in a free country, that we who could do so much for so many people and do so much for so many people, that we do not mobilize all our energies and declare a kind of campaign, a permanent campaign for the children, to save them, to save the children. They cannot die. They must not die. We are not here to watch children die. In a democratic society, that should be impossible. In a moral society, this is intolerable. But then societies, the way they live often in paradox. I'll give you in our own society, the Western world. You open, I, as a writer, have to look occasionally on the bestseller lists. I rarely find my books any, don't worry. Of my 40 books, 2 appeared quickly and disappeared. But I simply want to know, what do people read on every bestseller list you have? One book is about dieting, and the other one about cooking. Something else. Once upon a time, I remember, I used to be a journalist, I used to remember that there were certain rules in journalism, that politics had to be public and sex private. Today it's the opposite. No, really, in a society like this, I don't want to know certain things. I don't want to know really what is going on in somebody's bedroom. In a moral society, we don't look. Now, what is a moral society then? Remember again, I said God made himself a mistake. After trying everything, what did he do? He brought the floods. And he tried again. He simply destroyed the whole world. Who survived? Noah, his children, and he made them build an ark. And I confess to you, I never liked Noah. I felt he was too complacent. Why didn't he say to God, Master of the universe, You want to try over again. You want to punish this generation. Okay, but why the children? What do you want from the children? God said, build an ark. He built an ark. Go into the ark. Went into the ark. Leave the ark. He left the ark. He was too complacent, too obedient. Why didn't he say to God, don't? Now, strangely enough, in our commentaries, we have a marvelous postscriptum to the story. In our Midrashic or Talmudic commentaries, so Talmud is the commentary to the Bible, Noah does say afterwards, when he leaves the ark, he says to God, Master of the universe, why did you do that? And God says, now you are asking. Why didn't you ask before? In a moral society, you ask before. But in truth, when I read the story in the Bible, I didn't like it. Noah and his children and his families were saved. By the way, they were lucky. God wanted to entertain them, so he gave them a private circus, on the ark, And then they went down, and what did Noah do? He planted a vineyard. He became drunk. Really, to go through such an event, and all he could do as a response is to get drunk. He could have built a school, composed a prayer, do something. He got drunk. And then there was a rainbow. At that time, the rainbow had no political implications. And God said, Noah, this rainbow is a sign of a covenant. I promise you, I shall never again destroy the world with water. So when I read it for the first time, I was very happy. I went to sleep, I was quiet. But a text, when you read, you must resist the text. That's how you read a text. You must resist it. And you must dig into it. And you find there layers upon layers of meaning that generations of scholars and their disciples have left for you, just for you to discover and to enrich on them, and to go beyond them, and to contradict them. I said, wait a second. God said what he said, and he used fine print. He said, I shall not destroy the world by water. We know now the world is in danger not because of water, but maybe because of water too, but because of fire, the nuclear fire. Why didn't he simply say, I promise you I shall never destroy the world? So I read it again. And then I understood. What did God say? I shall never destroy the world. If the world is to be destroyed again, don't blame me. You will have done it. So don't. What does it really mean? That a moral society is something that we must build together all the time and never stop. So what is the characteristic of a moral society? Now let's turn it around. It's easier to speak about an immoral society. It's more interesting. Really, can you imagine a novel only about good things? Nobody would read it. We would have no Dostoevsky, no Kafka, no Stendhal, no Faulkner, nothing. A novel needs evil too. And an immoral society, therefore, is more exciting. So what is an immoral society? In an immoral society, first of all, the rule is that those in power have all the rights in the world. Those in power write what is the law. It is no longer democracy. It's not the people. It doesn't come from below. It comes from above. It's like in ancient Rome. In ancient Rome, the emperor usually was this absolute ruler, in spite of the Senate. He could establish the law. And when the emperor died, the next emperor brought his own laws. As a result, that is why most emperors, if not all, died an unnatural death because their successors wanted to change the law. And Machiavelli, he had such a great sense of humor. He said, poor Septimus Severus, the emperor, he didn't know that no tyrant ever succeeded in killing his successor. But they tried. So, in an immoral society, the human being doesn't matter. Which means, you remember Stalin said, what do you mean? The Pope? How many brigades does he have? Which means it's only the power. If the Pope has no brigades, he has no power. Why should he care? And he is the one who said what so many other dictators said. One death may be a tragedy. 100,000 is statistics. So it really didn't matter to them, or to him or to them, whether to kill or not to kill. And Stalin was capable, I'm not even speaking of Hitler, because I don't compare. There we know. You read at least my little book. But Stalin, the dictator, or Mao Zedong in China, they believed that the goal sanctifies, justifies the means, forgetting that in a moral society, a human being is not a means. A human being is a goal. Because every human being in our concept is unique, always unique. Meaning, whatever happens to that person, man or woman, makes that person so special. Not only because of what he or she is, but also because of their children. Anyone can be the father or the mother of a child, of a grandchild, of a great-grandchild, and who knows what that grandchild will be. If we mourn silently, we don't speak about it, so much about the children, the 1.5 million children who were killed, it's naturally because they were our children, but also because their death has done to humanity. Among them, there might have been a very great composer who would have brought joy to humanity at large for centuries. A great scientist, a great nutritionist, a great doctor who would have cured cancer and AIDS, a great poet who would have written poetry to give exaltation and exaltation to people who need joy and fervor for their lives. And they died when they were a year old. So what did we lose? We lost a lot. And therefore we believe that no one should say that a human being can be used as a means to bring votes, or a means to bring money, or a means to bring honor, or simply to bring conquest. A human being transcends his or her own condition. That is what we call the image of God, is the uniqueness of the human being. Now, my good friends, I know that here in this university, which is now, I know from what I've learned and heard, it is on the way of becoming a great university. You have a diversity of students and teachers. And therefore, what I say to you is actually what you know already. The danger is fanaticism. It is fanaticism that makes a society immoral, which means religious fanaticism, cultural fanaticism, ethnic fanaticism, anything. The moment it becomes fanatic, it undermines the very moral basis of the past and endangers the future of that society. I, as a Jew, I was born in a Jewish milieu, from a Jewish family, and all my life I lived as a Jew. I can tell you, I never in my adult life believed that my religion is superior to any other. It is not, nor is it inferior. I don't believe that God is closer to me than to you, whoever you are. I also believe that the more Jewish I am, the more universal I can become if I want to reach out and give what I am, to give what I have learned, received, absorbed, offer, share. And I also say, what I say about Jewishness, the Catholic can say about Catholicism, the Buddhist about Buddhism, and the Muslim about Islam. I even go further, even an atheist, somebody who says, I'm a secular person, I don't want to speak about God and so forth. Perfect. Provided that we share the same respect for each other. There were times, for years, I was fighting against intolerance. I still fight against intolerance, because intolerance is part of the immoral society. But I'm not fighting for tolerance, because tolerance implies a certain condescendence. I tolerate your views. I tolerate your presence. I tolerate your participation. Nonsense. Who am I to tolerate you? You are as good as I am. No, I use the word respect. And that is the basis for anything which is moral in the human being and in a society. From the religious viewpoint, we have seen what fanaticism has done. For 2,000 years, so much blood has been shed in the name of the love of God. So much hatred was spread. So much violence was committed, the Crusades, the Inquisition, and then each other, by the way, not only against Jews, against each other, because it was fanaticism. And I must say that today things changed. Never before have Jews and Christians enjoyed such good relations. Never before. I don't know in Muncie, I can tell you in other cities where I travel a lot, in Europe and here, never have so many rabbis and so many priests, Catholics or Protestants, all denominations. I am only sorry that they don't include also Muslim Qadis, Muslim leaders, religious leaders. All the three monotheistic religions should participate in this endeavor. They meet and they discuss social issues and they study together on every level. And then remember the Pope going to Jerusalem and the Lutheran leaders apologizing for Luther, after all, but the old Luther. So things have moved. And this, of course, is to me a great promise for all of us. There is a very beautiful story, another one, which I love. It is Martin Buber. I'm sure you know who Martin Buber was. He was a great philosopher. He was the Jewish religious existentialist. And I remember him, I was a student at the Sorbonne, and at that time, late after the war, late 40s, existentialism was the philosophy. Jean-Paul Sartre and Camus and Kierkegaard. We studied then existentialism. And here comes, I think it was 47, here comes from Jerusalem, Martin Buber. He looked like a prophet and he spoke like a prophet. So we filled the amphitheater of the Sorbonne, the University of Paris, waiting for him to come and speak. Had he spoken English, half would have understood. Had he spoken Hebrew, 20% would have understood. Had he spoken Yiddish, probably 30% would have understood. Had he spoken German, half again. But he chose to speak French. No one understood. Because his accent was so atrocious that not a single word. But we gave him a standing ovation because of what he was. And we knew he will read the essay anyway, which naturally he published it later, and we enjoyed it very much. And the story is a true story. He was involved in ecumenism, and he came to address an ecumenist colloquium. There were hundreds of priests, Protestants, Catholics. And he said, when his turn came to speak, he said, my good friends, after all, the difference between us, what is it? We all believe in God, right? Then we also believe in the Messiah. You say that he came and went back. I say he hasn't come yet. So I propose, let's wait together. And when he will come, we will ask him, have you been here before? And Buber said, I hope I will stand nearby and I will whisper in his ear, for heaven's sake, don't answer. We are waiting together. The question is, what are we waiting for? In an immoral society, one waits for the catastrophe of the other. One always wants to see the other person suffer. We always want to see in an immoral society the other person always oppressed. The fanatic believes that for him to feel superior, he must treat others as inferior. For him to feel free, he must imprison all other people in jail. The fanatic wants to put God himself in jail. That's the fanatic. The fanatic never listens. There is no dialogue in fanaticism, only a monologue, a long monologue. And therefore you cannot even talk to the fanatic, because this fanatic lives in his little own world, thinking he knows better than anyone what is good, what is evil, what is to be done, what is to be undone, and who may suffer, who must suffer, and who must be happy. For him to be happy, he must make all people unhappy. This is not what we would like a society to be. I am not free because other people are in jail. I am free because other people are free. Which means my freedom is conditioned by theirs. And therefore, as long as there are people who are not free, I am not free either. This is the lesson that we have when we think of what happened in the last century. The last century had two totalitarian ideologies that tried to dehumanize people, that tried to divert history from its destiny and say that life is a source of misery, that human beings are always carriers of cruelty. I don't believe that. I think a human being is capable of anything. But it's up to us to choose. The choice is ours. Albert Camus said, not to choose is also a choice. And I believe, therefore, my good friends, before opening the forum with the help of your president, Dr. Brownell, the questions, what do I believe? I believe that the most beautiful, the most human commandment in the Bible is not in the 10 Commandments. That we know, whether we obey or not is a different story, but at least we know. To my mind, the most exciting, the most stimulating, the most inspiring commandment is, thou shalt not stand idly by. When your fellow human being is a victim of injustice, when your fellow human being suffers, when your fellow human being is humiliated, and humiliation is the worst sin in human relations, don't stand idly by. And the end of the verse is, for I am the Lord. Which means, if you stand idly by, you are sinning not only against yourselves, but against me as well. I think that is the concept that should serve as the basis for anyone who tried to build a moral society. Now, is it possible to have a moral society? And the answer is no. You remember utopia. What is the meaning of utopia? Means the place that doesn't exist. And that was, invented by Thomas More in 1516. It's impossible to have a totally moral society. A moral society is a society which works on itself to be moral, that aspires to be moral, that because of the morality of its inhabitants, of its citizens, of its members, something emanates from that society, and then it becomes a prayer that moves heaven and earth, and the celestial throne as well. Thank you.
If you have questions, there are microphones up here at the front. We've got about 15 minutes. Please ask a question.
I just want to commend you for being such the positive role model that you have become, and being one of the first-year freshmen who chose to read your book. I just want to say that it was very impacting, and I really enjoyed it, and I was wondering maybe you could sign it.
Of course I will.
I loved your book too. I chose to read it too. I was wondering, through all the stuff that you went through in your life, what was the one thing that helped you get through? Like, what is the one thing inside you that made you drive to go farther and farther?
Oh, I could invent really stories and tell you I wanted to remain alive, to testify and tell the story. It's not true. As long as my father was alive, I wanted to live for him. And when he died, I didn't even feel that I was alive. I survived by accident. I wouldn't say I survived by miracle, because the word miracle is too strong. If God performed a miracle for me, he could have performed miracles for others as well, who were worthier than I, better than I. And I don't use that word. It was really an accident. I haven't done anything to survive. Now, having survived, I tried to confer a meaning on my survival and do something with it. And that's why I have not written much about that. You know, I have, as you heard from the President, I have written 40 books. Very few, maybe 5 or so, deal with that period. My others deal with philosophy and the Bible and novels, and not with that period. I don't want to create a morbid generation. I would like to give joy. I would like to sing with you. I would like to carry you somewhere, to the height, not to the abyss. But in the beginning, surely, I know one thing, that because I have seen what I had seen and endured the way I had endured, I must do something with that suffering, because suffering, you should know, confers no privileges. It's what we do with it that matters. If I use suffering to create more suffering, I betray it. If I use it, if I invoke it to prevent more suffering, then I somehow give it a more human dimension.
Thank you.
Reading the Holocaust wasn't very interesting to me until I read your book, Night, and I, like that other girl said, I commend you. But my question to you is, in your book you referred to God as being dead, and when your father passed away, did you feel like, did you give up hope? Did you continue to have faith? And I'm sure during that time period, I'm sure you lost some kind of faith, but did it completely go away? How did you feel? Did you feel like he was dead? as your book says?
No. I was young, I was 15, I was angry, I was sad, and therefore I said things, but I remained inside faith. The moment I said what I said, I went on praying. I prayed every morning, every Sabbath, every holiday, I prayed. And later on I didn't understand, why did I do that? I could have broken my covenant with God, I didn't. What do I believe in? I believe that it is, in my tradition at least, it is granted, we are granted the possibility and the authority and the permission to argue with God and to ask Him, why do you do that? How can you? How could you? You, the omnipotent, benevolent God, how could you? I'm still arguing. But from inside the faith, the tragedy of the believer is greater than the tragedy of the non-believer. But I went on believing, but my faith is a wounded faith. So I go on praying, worshipping, observing, but the faith is wounded because I still don't understand and never will.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, as a supporter of Israel, if you could comment on the Israeli-Arab peace process and the future of Jerusalem and what you think should be done about the city.
I am optimistic in spite of everything that things will work out, because since the Oslo negotiations, and especially Rabin and Arafat, I am very hopeful. For the moment, because of Jerusalem, things don't look well. And I think it was a mistake to open up Jerusalem. I had suggested through my channels, when they came to Camp David, that they make a vow not to speak about Jerusalem for 20 years. And I had suggested that to use those 20 years to build confidence and respect and even friendship for each other. Meaning, Arafat should declare a state, and Israel should help that state with every means possible. Every month, children from Palestinian schools should come and visit Israeli schools. And students from high school and college students, and the other way around, the other way too. Teachers should meet once a month from both sides. Writers, artists, singers, musicians, politicians, and literally build friendship. 20 years from now, there will be enough baggage of confidence and trust to tackle this impossible problem. It's impossible. Because I don't think that Israel can give up Jerusalem. It's no way. And Jerusalem, after all, is the heart of Judaism. Remove Jerusalem, there is no Jewish religion or Jewish history. On the other hand, Jerusalem does not figure in the Quran. Never was Jerusalem the capital of any other nation except for the Crusades for 80 years. So I would say then, look, we understand the sensitivity among the Muslims for Jerusalem, among the Christians for Jerusalem, but not now. Let's first do what we can do in good faith. And then 20 years from now, we can find the solution. There are solutions. It wasn't done, maybe they will do it now, I hope. But nevertheless, I feel that we are much better off than we were in the past. So hope is possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Wiesel, you say that the human is the goal. And I fully believe that human life is not sacrificable. But what then is the answer to the dictators, Hitler, Stalin, Slobodan Milosevic. What do we, as a morally responsible society, do with these individuals?
Or with their system, right? Look, I discussed it with your president earlier. I was there. When the war began in Bosnia, I went to Bosnia. In Cambodia, I went everywhere. Then I went last year, I went to Kosovo, to Macedonia, and to Albania, because I feel I must be there. I am against war, believe me. I've seen the grotesque cruelty of war. In war, children die. The adults make war and children are the victims. So I'm against it. However, a civilized society, a moral society, must involve itself in injustices if they are on a massive scale. I felt we had to intervene in Bosnia. I was there. I saw Sarajevo. I went to a camp, and although it was called then a death camp, it wasn't. But the atrocities were of such nature that we had to stop them. We had to intervene. The same way as we had to intervene in Kosovo. So I worked for intervention. I, who am against military, I'm not inspired by military things. But I worked for intervention, which means when you speak about Milosevic and so forth, we have to do something about it. Now, Stalin, it means the communist regime. Hitler, of course, we defeated. Look, remember one thing. 2 totalitarian regimes, 2 dictatorships, right? Nazism and communism. Nazism, we defeated Nazism. It's true, it took a tremendous alliance which Roosevelt created, and Churchill, Churchill was the hero. And we went to war. America, when I go to France, I go occasionally to Normandy. If some of you have been there, my God, there are military cemeteries. It's almost infinite. You see the infinite rows of tombstones of young American soldiers and officers, 17 years old, 18-year-old children who come from God-forsaken villages in America to fight for the freedom of God-forsaken villages in Normandy. And you feel so humble in their presence and so grateful to them for what they have done. We must always remember that. I cannot tell you the depth of my gratitude to this country and what we have done. We have sacrificed 400,000 youngsters. We defeated Germany and Italy, all the fascist countries. The communist regime collapsed from within. We didn't do anything. Simply because it was based on falsehood and cruelty and barbarism. It couldn't last longer. Now, it came as a surprise to me too, like everybody else. Nobody had foreseen it. Neither the CIA, nor the KGB, nor the Mossad in Israel, or Deuxième Bureau in France, not a single intelligence service had foreseen that collapse, because it came from within. So, when you study history, therefore, you are optimistic, but you must help. And I feel we must help. We must, when evil shows its ugly mask, the mask of hatred and bigotry and fanaticism, we must fight it. The means, we have means. We are free. Our freedom is a weapon.
Thank you.
I just want to tell you, I was told that at 9 o'clock we have to leave, so 2 more questions.
Thank you. I have to tell you, that book really touched my heart, and 2 things kept popping up and I kept wondering about when I was reading it. The first is, did you find out why you cried when you prayed? And the other is, do you ever eat soup? I'm sorry.
I'm a very poor eater in general. I don't eat much. But soup, look, I want me to tell you what I eat? I'll tell you after. But anyway, crying, we didn't cry there. Couldn't cry. We had to learn how to cry after the war. Because if we had started to cry, we wouldn't have stopped, ever. Last question.
Dr. Wiesel, I read your book as a high school freshman, and it touched me immensely. And I was just wondering, what is it inside you that allowed you to see these horrifying and just grotesque things that you can turn it around and speak about it here today?
You realized I didn't speak about it. I only answer your questions because I don't speak about these things really. In the beginning, when nobody did or very few did, I also did. But then, survivors, I urged them to speak, and they began speaking, and their children began speaking. And then teachers began teaching, and I am grateful to these teachers who are teaching. So I stopped really. I don't speak about the Holocaust. I don't lecture on the Holocaust. But I listen, and I owe you my sincerity and my affection, that if you ask, I should answer you. But the question is not how could we be happy afterwards, because we can. No one can be as grateful in the world as we can. We are grateful for every gesture, for every smile, for every word. We are grateful because for us every day is grace. And every encounter, a miracle. And every word, an offering. The question was, how come that we didn't lose our sanity? That is the question. I don't know. After the war, I studied philosophy. And in France, we needed some minor, and I chose psychopathology. And for 2 years or so, I was studying in a hospital for mentally insane. In the beginning, I didn't know why. And since then, I'm attracted to psychiatry, psychology. In every book of mine, there is a madman. In every novel, there is a madman and a child, always. A madman and a child. In every novel. And to this day, I don't know. How did we manage to remain normal? But then psychiatrists will tell you that it is not normal to be normal. I want you to know, my good friends, that we Jews celebrate next year a new year. And the new year is an occasion for us to crown God as King of the universe, not of our people alone, but of all people. And therefore, usually, we wish each other a year of joy and happiness and serenity. And this is a wish that I would like to share with you. May the year to come, in this university, in this community, may the year bring much joy, only joy. Thank you.